Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Dave and Adam here with the Real Estate Dads. We hope you're doing well. We are going to be interviewing guests periodically to shed some light on and share information with you. And today we have Kristen Wong from Seasons Estate Planning. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, good. How are you guys doing?
Good, good. We're glad you joined us. And the reason why we have you on here today is because, especially in these times, a lot of people and families are thinking about the future, thinking about their families and best ways to protect themselves and their families going forward. And it's something that sometimes it's a little hard to talk about, but we're having you on here to discuss some ways to protect our families with our estates and our children specifically.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's interesting in our culture. We don't necessarily like to talk about death or emergencies. I think most of us are living our lives based on crossing our fingers and hoping nothing goes wrong. And obviously we're seeing now that that doesn't help in all cases. And so it's really good. It's good that we're having this conversation and that we're thinking about the things that could happen with our families and with ourselves so that we're prepared.
Yeah, and even when it's funny, even when I was introducing this, I was even afraid to even bring up the word death, and just because it feels so awkward and you don't want to think about it. But I mean, if we're just being real and honest with the virus that's going around, it's affecting a lot of people and families, and at some point we may know somebody affected by it, and hopefully we're not. But it's out there, and we really do need to address and deal with it and make sure we're all protected.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really smart that you guys are doing this and helping the community in that way.
And one thing that I know we've talked about, and Adam and we've talked about this, is how are our kids protected? God forbid something happens to both, myself and my wife Lauren, and for all your families, and what happens to the kids. And we've talked about this, Kristen, before, as guardianship.
Yeah.
And we thought that'd be a good topic here to start, and we'll bring you on for other topics as well. But we wanted to focus on like how to protect our kids in the event that both parents or both people that are taking care of the kid are no longer around.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few ways that we can protect our kids. And actually, I'm a mom. I have two, a teenager and a teenager. And so I was on the mom's Facebook group the other day, and someone was posting saying that they realized if something were to happen to her and her husband, that they didn't know what would happen and what would happen with the kids. And I think it's really important for people to know that from a legal perspective, the police aren't allowed to leave kids with anyone other than an adult relative. And, I have some clients who have many adult relatives who live nearby, and that's not a problem. But most of us, especially here in California, don't have family that lives nearby, and don't have family that even potentially lives in the state. And I think, most of us think, okay, well, if something happened to me, at least my spouse would be there. But I think what we're seeing, especially now when we're all quarantined together, there is the potential for a strong likelihood for both parents to be unavailable. And and again, it doesn't have to be that the parents have passed away. It just has to be that they're not able to care for the kids. And so yeah, I think basically what I do in my practice, I don't know about other estate planning attorneys, but I have different documents. One is a long-term guardianship, so that you could, so if something long-term did happen to the parents of your children, that you would be able to say who you want to be raising your kids. And I think, and whenever I talk to people, they say, oh yeah, I have a big family, but I know exactly who would be raising my kids. And the problem is, unless you only have one person and everyone agrees, the courts don't automatically assume that the person you want is going to be the one that's going to be chosen. And so that's why it's really important to document those things. And then so that sorry I was telling you earlier, my family has commandeered the house for coronavirus. They're all splayed out all over, and so I decided to come outside. But yeah, we have some unexpected visitors here.
No worries.
So anyway, so that's obviously the long term, but then the other thing that I do is short term nomination of guardian, and that's a separate document, and I treat it like a phone tree. I put contact information for all people that are in your lives who are within 20 minutes likely to be available and would be a comfort to your kids.
Yeah.
And that's very important because especially now, the way that I describe it to my clients is there's no downside to putting more people on this document, because we want them to all have each other's contact information, because we don't know who's going to be available at that time. And we I say this a lot, we can't control all heartache in life, but what we can do is try to minimize unnecessary heartache. And so that's why I put together documents like this to help minimize the chance that the kids could go to Child Protective Services even temporarily while they're waiting for family members to arrive or for the parents to get better.
Yeah, and so what goes into, like, when you're considering designating a guardian, like what do you suggest people look for, and what do you think? How do you guide your clients and what's important?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to think about who would raise your kids the way that you raise them. And I have some clients who, they realize that none of their family members are really aligned with their parenting style.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to weigh a lot of different factors. If you want your kids to stay in the neighborhood where you've built a community, if you want family members to be raising your kids, the age of the people that you're considering. And so, it's really fact specific. So, I try to talk through all of the points to help people figure out. But one thing that's most important, and again, especially now, I think some people hold off because either they and their spouse can't agree or they can't decide who they want. And I think the question I always ask is, who would you want to raise your kids that is a better decision than whoever the court is going to decide for you? Because someone is going to be making this decision whether or not you take the initiative to get it done.
Right.
And I think all of us would agree that if those were our choices, which they are, we would all want to be the one making the decisions here.
Right.
So I actually got a question about that. It's and this, with everything going on, how many, say you pick somebody to look after the kids, and God forbid something has happened to them also with the coronavirus, how long should the list be? Is there a number? I mean, what happens?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And, just as a little bit of backstory on me, the reason I got into estate planning was because my younger sister passed away a few years ago. And I remember she sat me down at her house a few months before she died, and she said, do you have guardian's name for your kids? Because if you don't, you should. And in that moment, I realized that, yes, I did have guardians named, but she was at the top of my list.
Right.
And my parents were behind her. And, at the time when I made the list, they were in their 60s. They're now in their mid 70s. And I realized that if I hadn't redone my plan, it was very possible that I would have ended up with no guardians named. And so I think that's a really good point. And again, we're all thinking about things differently now.
Yeah.
I generally recommend at least 3 people, and usually I recommend at least 3 people of our age bracket. And it's fine to obviously put, if you want your parents to be listed first, as long as they're available, I think that's wonderful. But to make sure that you have more people listed below that. So yeah, I know everything's changed a little bit in these last few weeks. The world has dramatically shifted.
Yeah, it really
I
has.
mean, you also touched upon an idea of how often should you change this? Because you said, like, you originally had your parents on it, and they were in their 50s, and now they're older now. So how often should you change or update this guardianship?
Yeah, it's interesting. In doing plan reviews for people who already have plans,
Mm.
one thing that I have noticed is that people have a tendency to say, okay, well, I'm done with my estate planning. I can check that off my life to-do list and then not have to worry about it anymore. And, you know, again, in the situation that I was just describing about myself and my
Yeah.
sister, for my clients, I always meet with them every 3 years, just to check and make sure that the plan um, is the way they want it to be and continues. But I also recommend that anytime there's a shift in life situation, to reconsider this and see if anything needs to be updated. And I had someone recently who said, um, they had their estate plan, and then they realized the first person on every single document was someone that they had a falling out with. And so, you know, if so, those documents would govern until the point where they decided to update those plans. So I think, you know, I would say at a minimum every year to at least think about this, or anytime there's a life change situation.
Yeah, I guess you kind of have to treat it like a living document, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
keeping it updated. And yeah, it's interesting. You know, you brought up an interesting point that actually my wife and I did not consider. Both of our guardians are out of state, and we didn't even think about the idea of, well, if, you know, keeping him in state because he's maybe got a sphere as friends, is just familiarity.
Yeah.
Um,
And in my experience, I have found people who have kids who are, I would say the cutoff is usually third or fourth grade, where it is much more important to them that the kids are with family if something were to happen to them.
yeah,
But certainly when our kids become, you know, teenagers and teenagers, their friend circle is going to be a tremendous help for them, and uprooting them like that just to make sure that they're with family is not necessarily in their best interest and won't necessarily help them cope with the loss of their parents.
right. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, the other thing you brought up was the whole interim guardianship. And I think I remember you telling Adam and I a story some time ago where, you know, there was like a babysitter, or unfortunately, you know, the parents were not, I forgot what the story was, but basically there was a babysitter, no blood relative.
Yeah.
And things like that we don't think about too. So can you explain a little bit more about that interim guardianship? Because I don't think a lot of people even think about that part of it.
Yeah, and actually, of all of the plan reviews that I've done, the only time that I've seen what I call a temporary nomination of guardian was in the will. And at that at that point, it's way too late. First of all, you have to die for the will to kick in, and second of all, nobody has your will with them. And so again, what I do is I have a legal document that says I do not want my children to go into child protective services, and so these people have the legal authority to take my kids. And again, I talk about how to choose those people. There's different categories where I recommend just being comprehensive about it, and then I put all of their phone numbers on there because I want those people to have that document in hand when your family needs it. And the first people that I did this for was me and my husband. And I sent that, I don't know if I told you guys this story. I sent the document to all of the people on the list, but included a bunch of parents of our kids' friends. And I circled back to ask them about it. And one of them said, "Oh, yeah, got it on a magnet on our refrigerator." And I was thinking,
Wow.
okay, well, you don't need to have it that
Right.
that prompt, and hopefully we will never need this document. But what all you need is for those people to have ready access to it when it's needed.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Sorry, I
So
got
what's,
that.
oh, well, we can't even hear it. So what's the process? There's forms you fill out. I know you said there's a more of a long-term process or form, and then you said there's something that you provide that's maybe a little bit more short form. Maybe I misunderstood.
So basically, I include those documents for all of my clients. There's several estate planning documents to have a comprehensive package and make sure, you know, things like healthcare directive, HIPAA waiver, power of attorney, all of those things. And of course, a will and a trust, to make sure that the family is protected, because there's a lot of different scenarios. Basically what I do, I usually start with all my clients with what I call a family wealth planning session, just to educate people. I talk about this a lot, but we have 12 years of compulsory education in this country, but we have decided that this information is supposed to be a secret. Like, this seems like extremely useful information to know how to avoid probate, how to make sure your family is protected in an emergency. And the only way that most people find out about it, if you're lucky, you find out about it because it happened to someone else. And worst case scenario, you find out about it because you see front and center how treacherous the probate process is, and conservatorship and guardian nomination, all of these things. We all want to try to avoid the court system, and it is very easy to do that. We just, most people don't know how to.
Right. No. I think we covered some of the basics here with guardianship. I know there's so much more to estate planning and so much more that you do, but we just wanted to kind of, take one small topic and one part of what you do and shed some light on it for people out there that may be thinking about doing some estate planning and especially some guardianship planning. We definitely want
I think this topic really gets the ball rolling in terms of all of us planning your estate.
Yeah.
Because this is, planning who's going to be taking care of our kids is the first and foremost topic on our heads, on our brains, So after that, everything else should be the easiest part.
Yeah.
Well, Kristen, we're going to have you back on another video, hopefully, and you're open to doing it, but you mentioned how to avoid probate. We'd love to talk about that because Adam and I deal with probate sales, and we know you're an expert in the field. So we'll definitely like to have you back to discuss, the benefits of having a trust in place and some different other estate planning topics as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for all of us, we're all three of us are just trying to educate the community and make sure that everybody knows how to handle this in a responsible and a relatively painless way. So, I'm happy to be on again. Yeah, I would love to talk to you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me.
We're gonna put some links down below too for information that you provided from Seasons Estate Planning, and we'll definitely have you back.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.